Thank you, John, for that inspiring message, and most importantly, thank you for your generous and magnanimous support. Thank you, Kate, for sharing our personal story and the story of our community. I was so very proud to represent that community in the Minnesota legislature. I am humbled and honored to be standing before you today. First, I have some thank yous of my own. I would like to thank the CD3 leadership. You heard from our chair, Ken Martin. We've got our vice chair, Marge Hoffa here. Our executive director, Corey Davis here. All of the state central committee leaders who have worked so hard, the Senate district chairs, the vice chairs, and the tremendous volunteers that have worked not just to make today happen, but have served to make sure we elect leaders who represent our values and our vision. So a thank you to all of you for that. Thank you to my mentor in the state Senate. She sat with me from the moment I announced my candidacy, making sure that I won that election along with you all, and has now prepared me to stand before you today, and that is Senator Ann Rest. And as a loyal mentor, she was, of course, the first to contribute to my campaign, which we very much appreciated. I also acknowledge my esteemed colleagues who are with us today, my very close friend, Representative Yvonne Seltzer, Senator John Hoffman, Senator Christie, Representative Portman. I don't know who else is here that I've missed, but we are so very fortunate to have such amazing legislators in Minnesota representing you all. Now, if you'll just give me a moment, and so just don't time me, okay? I only get to do this one time, right? So give me a little leeway. So allow me to introduce my family, if you will. So, of course, most important is I have to introduce my husband. There he is, Matthew. Matthew Bonoff. Matthew is my chief strategist and my very best friend. Our youngest son, Jacob, is here. Jacob is here also as proxy to the brother and sister who live in D.C., Joe and Lee, and Adam, who lives in Los Angeles. I wish they could be here with us today, but thanks, Jacob, for representing our family. My brother Stephen, right there. Stephen has been my honorary, you can wait till I introduce the whole thing. Stephen has been my honorary co-chair since the first campaign and has never stopped helping me, and I appreciate that. My brother Alex, where's Alex? Back there is actually not only my brother, but a field organizer on the campaign. I would like to introduce my mother, Susan Seitel, and my father, Barry Bonoff. So now, and I am so blessed to be surrounded by so many volunteers behind me out there, my staff who I treasure. I would not be here today were it not for you. It was so fitting that I was able to announce my candidacy in my home Senate district, where I first began my political career in District 44, and you have certainly taught me the ropes, District 44. Thank you. So thank you all for being our delegates today, representing the will of Democrats all across the South and Northwest Metro. We are proud to be CD3. When I won a special election in 2005, becoming the first Democrat to win the district in 20 years, Marge Hoff is nodding, so many here worked so hard on that. We did not have a pro-choice Minnesota Senate at that time. We had the Democrats in control, but we didn't have a pro-choice Senate. Terri Clark and my special election victories changed the landscape, and together with our like-minded colleagues, we stopped an attack on Roe v. Wade, and at the time Michelle Bachmann was in the Senate, and they were trying to put a constitutional amendment on the ballot at that time. I think it would have been a very different ending if they had prevailed then. But with our elections, we were able to have the votes to stop that. When we did have the House and the Senate, we were able to pass the Freedom to Marry. I was proud to be one of the 5 Senate co-authors on that legislation. our voices do matter. Together, we all change lives, we reshape history, and we transform the future. The headwinds we faced when I joined the Senate in 2005, the attack on Roe v. Wade and the aggressive attempt to limit our ability and freedom to love is nothing compared to the gale force hurricane winds exhibited in this national presidential contest. Let me be perfectly clear, that is why I am standing here. That is absolutely why I'm standing here. I stand here to denounce that hateful rhetoric, to stand up for the interests of each and every person. We can take nothing for granted. I agree with Ken Martin. This is very risky. A Donald Trump presidency threatens our democracy, our freedom, our safety. His candidacy has brought the politics of hate to the national conversation and puts every one of us at risk, especially the disadvantaged and the most vulnerable among us, and that is very serious. But there is something that is even more serious than a Donald Trump presidency, and that is a Donald Trump presidency with a complicit Congress. That is frightening. We must have candidates up and down the ticket who can and will articulate this very real and frightening risk. I ask and have received, thankfully, your endorsement and pledge to you to be that standard bearer. I will speak out for our values and against bigotry, hate, and reckless statements that have the potential to bring violence to our country and incite both our allies and our enemies. I'm a courageous leader, I don't shrink from conflict, and I'm loyal to the people and not politics. My opponent has said he will support the nominee. That is not a courageous position, and it's not in America's best interest. This is a time for people to stand up and speak out for what's right and against the politics of hatred and division. This is a time to stand up for women's rights and against those who demean women and who would push the clock back and take our rights away. In my 11 years in the state Senate, my work has been about building bridges, forging partnerships, and exchanging ideas to actually move the needle on the issues that matter most. The challenge we face in our state, our nation, and our world are grave, and it demands our best thinking and our selfless action. And we're not acting for ourselves, we are acting for our children and for their children. I'm running for Congress because I'm determined to bring that style of leadership to Washington. It is not about partisanship and it's not about politics. We reached out to you by text. I don't know how many of you got a text from us asking what was important to you. So those of you who did, it's because we had your cell phones. We didn't have everyone's. But you answered back, and we are grateful for that. You said that economic security, job security is paramount. You said health care is important. I hear you, and I agree. I will bring the ideas and programs I've championed that reduce college debt, connect students to high-paying jobs, and make sure no one's left behind due to discrimination, lack of hope, and access to education, and support that work in Washington. You said education is important, of course, because in the CD3, our support for education is unparalleled, and any member who represents this district brings that commitment to, whether it be in the state or to Washington. I will bring my demand for early education and the full funding of the federal government's promise to pay for special education to the national conversation. Let's make that a campaign issue, right? Thank you. My knowledge and leadership in this arena will serve our families well, and with your help, we can bridge the achievement gap so that all children have an equal chance to succeed in the country. I am ready to hit the campaign trail. I love campaigns. I don't know if you knew that. Yesterday, the DCCC endorsed our candidacy by putting our race in the Red to Blue program. This program sponsors a handful of promising candidates to turn congressional seats blue around the country. It's an honor to be chosen to be part of that group. This endorsement is a signal that our country is watching this race. and that they believe we will win in November. And that support is very important. They will provide a tremendous amount of resources, and that endorsement is important, but it's not the most important thing. The most important thing is your endorsement. Your support is what matters. So I humbly thank you for that endorsement, and I aggressively ask for your action. Join Team Bonoff in parades, on the phones, share with all your friends and neighbors. Help us close the gap between our opponent's war chest of $2.5 million by going to terribonoff.com and donating. That would be today. Today would be a great day to do that. My finance person, Madeline, she thinks that. Yep. Okay, great. We know that many of my opponents' dollars will be going to negative political attacks, but yet I believe the voters of the 3rd District will not be moved by negative political attacks that are distort my record and will simply be more of the same. We will do our best to raise the funds we need to compete, yet we know this race cannot be bought. It will only be earned. So, my friends, now is the time. By working tirelessly together, we will go forward with our vision for a safe, strong, and prosperous America with equal opportunity for all. Stand with me, and when I'm elected on Tuesday, November 8th, 2016, I will carry all of your voices to Washington. Thank you very much. For some questions, so I happily will answer any questions. I do want to single out Representative Benson, who was my partner for so many years in the Minnesota legislature. Thank you.
If a timekeeper can watch the time for us, we have 10 minutes to answer questions. And Terri will have 1 minute to answer each question. We've got a lot of questions submitted. We tried to get questions that represent a good range of issues. So we'll begin. Can you please explain your greatest accomplishment in the legislature and why?
Well, thank you. So I've been working for 3 years on a program that's called the Pipeline Project. What this program is, it brings a European model of educating post-secondary students where when they graduate from high school, instead of going to college and having debt and not knowing what they're going to do after, they get hired by a company as they leave high school, and they then begin to get trained in a job they're not yet ready for while they're in college. So you could go for 1 year, 2 years, or 4 years. So we drafted legislation that brought this program forward in 4 different industries, and each industry had an advisory council where the industry actually picked the jobs we were going to do this in. And so we've now got about 16 different jobs that we have allowed Minnesota students to get some state tuition support to be part of this dual education program that's similar to an apprenticeship program while they're working in a company. So it's hard to describe that in a minute. It's really complicated. But the point to remember, I got it, the point to remember is these students will have a job, they won't have any debt, they'll have a degree. Okay, good. Okay, what else? I think you get the point. But it's really exciting. It's been written about in Forbes magazine, and we're getting a lot of attention nationally for it.
The next question is, what are your 2 top priorities representing Minnesota in Congress?
Well, thank you very much. So I have so many priorities, but I can tell you that my commitment to education will remain, whether it be early childhood. I mean, who's talking about birth to 5? As we look at the tremendous challenges we have with this baby boom generation retiring, and we know that we have got to put our arms around the incoming generation and make sure there are future leaders, we must make certain that everyone has access to education from day one, from birth and then all the way through post-secondary. And so I will make that a focus of my work. Thank you. In addition, I mentioned that thing about special ed because, to tell you the truth, if we could solve that problem, we wouldn't have a funding gap when it comes to our K-12 system. And this is a national issue. The federal government promised to pay a share of special education, and then they didn't keep their word. So I'm also going to be working on workforce issues that I feel strongly about, and then I believe there is a very serious threat to our safety and our security in the global world, and so I will be making that a priority as well.
The next question is, what is your position on efforts to restrict women's reproductive health options?
Well, thank you for that question. I think I made that clear in my my speech, because you can count on me to make sure that we don't use government as a barrier for women having access to all health reproductive issues.
Will you help address student loan debt?
Absolutely. You know, as chair of higher ed, I have been working on that for the past 4 years. We had 3 key objectives in the Senate Higher Education Committee. It was reducing debt, making sure every student in Minnesota has a post-secondary degree, and then helping train our 21st century workforce. So we actually did a law, passed a law in Minnesota that allowed our department, our Office of Higher Ed, to refinance student debt to take advantage of the creditworthiness of the state of Minnesota. So we actually did that before it was even something that was being talked about at the national level, and Hillary Clinton singled out Minnesota for that program. So I will continue to work on efforts like that, as well as I mentioned the pipeline project, because I think that's really the key. It's not about just saying higher education is free, because free doesn't help if you don't have a job when you're done, or if you start and then you don't complete. We have to do a better job supporting our students as they walk through that door, making sure they leave without debt and have access to a high-paying job.
The next question is, what will you do in Congress to address income inequality?
Well, thank you. I have spent the last 11 years in the state legislature doing all I can to level the playing field. And I think the most important thing we can do to address income inequality is to really support educational access for all and high quality education, because the surest ladder out of poverty is a strong education. In addition, when there are disparities, we need to make sure that people have access to jobs. And so one of the things that we brought to the legislature this session is there's a program that is taking place in Michigan and in Ohio that is essentially like a Match.com for people to find jobs. I know my staff is here, Dave Kornecki, my committee administrator, but this company out of Michigan was made up of these aeronautic engineers. They created a software tool whereby you fill out all these questions about your interest, what you're going to do, and then the companies put their job openings on, they fill out the same application, and they do this algorithmic match. And in Michigan, you gotta listen to this, 20,000 students were placed in internships in 1 year's time. 20,000 using this Match.com approach. And so I would say that nationally, and that levels the playing field because it's a blind match. So people who might have been thrown out because of their diverse background or because of some prejudice, they now get a shot at it.